What's up, everybody? Philip at Trade Genius. Going to dive into the Bitcoin charts this week and see what's ahead for us. A lot of consolidation up in here, so we're going to talk a little bit about market structure and how that affects the price of Bitcoin, not only what we've seen, but also going forward. So we'll get into that in this video. I'll also look at some on-chain metrics to see how those are developing. All right, so let's dive into it.
Trade Genius.
Guys, really quickly, we do have our special running 40% off. So if you wanted to get anything like the indicators, 40% off. Again, that's for a year. Or if you want to join us in the room, this is a big value here for the special and joining us in the room and the indicators, which you get the ribbon system training, the ribbon indicators, and the market sniper indicators, which are really, really good on all time frames, all products. So check that out. All right, let's dive into this chart. So what we're doing now, essentially, or what we've been doing, is we're consolidating in this large area here, right? So one thing about markets, market structure, is that you'll go from balance to imbalance to balance to imbalance, or as otherwise known as you're trending. When you're imbalanced, you're trending one way or the other, or consolidating in an area, right? So that's what we essentially have here with Bitcoin. It's consolidating in this area. So where we break out of this and close either up or down decisively, probably going to dictate the move for a bit coming out of that range. So that's really, for a more macro viewpoint, that's really what we're doing up in here. So if we do leave this range, I think that we're probably leaving this area for good. I really don't see, once we get past this point in the halving cycle and we start to make that move up, that's a pretty long move up. You may have some brief pullbacks and things like that, but nothing major. It's a grind higher for a long time typically. So that's the upside. If the downside breaks down here, then what I would look for is not only the 200 period moving average on the daily down here at 8,200, but I think the real value would be getting back into this range where we hit this high volume node at 7,200. I don't see it going below that unless there's a big deflationary cycle coming out of this whole COVID mess and things get very depressed and a lot of liquidity comes out of the entire system as a whole, equities, all that. It's going to be, it will affect Bitcoin in that respect. I know we want to think of Bitcoin as a flight to safety, and I think ultimately it will break away from the markets, but you do have to respect deflationary events. And even with the amount of printing that the Fed is doing and all that, you can't really, usually you can't escape depressionary events like that. You will see some kind of pullback. So I think 7,200, all that being said, is a very, very good spot as far as value post halving on this third halving cycle. Okay. As far as the levels in play this week, if we go to the Delta chart, now this is based on the June futures contract at BitMEX. That will change where we will have new futures contract goes out to September. So next Friday, that futures contract rolls over. So we'll switch to that. The structure of all this will look very similar, probably less chop when we get to the futures, September futures chart. But as far as the way this has been cycling, as far as the Delta readings, they're going to be similar in structure. Now, we got a lot of chop in here. As I said, this is a lot of balance area. But one thing, if you drill down to the smaller time frames, the ribbon system works really well. The sniper indicator works really well. And also, too, one thing that we haven't discussed a lot lately will be the fibs. But whenever you see these high to low or low to high moves, you can always slap the fibs on, right? And look at where price retracts to. Generally, you want to fade the move if it gets into that 0.5 to 618 area. Like this came down, notice it bounced up, hits that 0.5 perfectly, and then rejects nicely. And then you get another move back up. You can do the same thing again. You get a move down to here. You can actually pull that whole range. You'll notice it comes up between the 0.5 and the 618. Rejects again, right? So that's one way that you can play the fibs. In this particular situation right here, we do a low to high. So we're pulling from the low to the high of that move, and there's the 50% bounces off that, right? So those are just things you can do that get respected, especially on these 4-hour ranges. They work pretty well. So don't forget to have that in your toolbox as well. All right. Okay, again, updating the capitulation chart. The capitulation is looking more like there's more capitulation to come, unfortunately. If you notice here, what we're looking for is a rounding of this capitulation. Typically, when we see these green dots, we look for that. So like here, we look for this rounding move, and these should come into play when that happens. It's been trying, but we're losing those green dots, meaning that we're losing the closing of those bands, meaning that the hash power would be coming back online. And all that really means is that hash power is falling back off again. You can see that here on the hash power, that you see like we're making lower highs on the hash power, right? So they're trying to find that spot. I think things are still working themselves out between price, how these miners are being compensated, right? And then market value and hash power and difficulty. All that is a self-healing mechanism. You can see the difficulty's had a decent drop, and I'm gonna in another video I'll show you how that this particular drop has related to a past drops in similar size versus the market cycle. We'll get into that a little bit. But again, like we talked about last video, this is key. If you're getting long these levels during this capitulation, historically, you've never done wrong. In fact, you've done extremely well off of that. So long term, still okay to get long here, but we could see potentially more downside based on all the things that are going on. So just keep all that into perspective, okay? And then last but not least, on the stock indices, again, looking at where we are, we seem to be doing another area of balance, right? So we had this big long area of balance. We moved up out of it, this imbalance. Now we're coming back into balance, finding some support at the top part of this balance. So market is looking for a place to hang out. And it's kind of crazy to me that we've extended this out as far as we have, as far as off the lows, and still trying to find some footing to make higher lows. Once we make a lower low, so this level here is going to be key, this 2964. I think all eyes are on that. If that does not hold, that could be a sign that we are going to pull back some. Considering everything going on with the market and everything in the economy, this is severely disconnected. So there's a big risk there. And as you've seen in the last video, Bitcoin is still very correlated with the market. That hasn't changed. And so there is a lot of downside risk. And once that goes, that's going to affect everything Bitcoin and the alts. So you got to be careful here on the alts. You want to make sure your stops are fairly tight, because if things do roll over and Bitcoin does decide to do a decent pullback, a lot of those alts will pull back pretty hard as well. So you want to be wary of that, because we've been in a fairly decent, favorable alt cycle here for a while. I'm going to get into that in the next video about our alt cycles and what we can typically expect as far as timing on those. We're at the end of this cycle is kind of the spoiler on that, but we're going to get into that in more detail. And then looking at going forward in the next few months, the spots to be looking to get back in position long for the next pump. All right, well, that's it for this video, guys. So stock market balance could pull back. That will affect Bitcoin. Bitcoin consolidating here in balance. But remember, you get those 4-hour ranges established. Look for those fib levels, also your indicators to confirm, and watch those levels react. And I think that is for short term, that's a great play. Longer term, all about this balance area. Breaking out, going to be very, very bullish. Breaking down will give you one last pullback to buy. All right, guys, that's it for this video. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Again, if you're interested in joining us or getting our indicators or training, check out this package. Love to see you in the room. All right, guys, take care. Bye-bye.
Trade Genius.